Welcome, everybody, to Touch of Torah. Tonight, it's December 26th, and we have Rabbi Barry Silver, spiritual leader of Congregation Va-Dor with us. And we are so pleased to have all of you joining us today for our Parsha in Genesis, Vayechi, and I believe it's the last Parsha of the book of Genesis. Take it away, Rabbi.
Thank you so much, Sharon. Yes, as usual, you are correct, and thank you for organizing this Touch of Torah. We're reading the last Sedra of the first book of the Bible, the book of Genesis. As Sharon said, it's called Vayechi. Vayechi is a Hebrew word it translates into three English words. It means, and he lived. And is va. Chi is like the word high, but it's altered somewhat because of the change in tense. And the yud, vayechi, makes living past tense. So, and he lived, vayechi. And it starts out talking about Jacob, and he lived 17 years after his arrival in Egypt from Canaan, where he was brought by Joseph with the family in order for them to survive the famine. So he came to Egypt and lived 17 years. What's interesting about that is that in the beginning of the Joseph saga, it starts out, and Joseph is 17 years old when the story about his dreams begins. It's just kind of interesting that everything revolves around Joseph, even though he was 17 and then Jacob lived 17 years. He was just such a larger than life personality. So he lived 17 years, and then he said to Joseph, who is the patriarch now, the new patriarch, bury me not in Egypt, but in the cave of Machpelah, which is in the west bank of Israel. The passage then goes on, and at the very end, Joseph then dies and says to his brethren, bury me in the land of Canaan in the West Bank. So today, many people are saying there should not be one Jew who lives in the West Bank. This is Palestinian land. And by Palestinian land, they mean something quite radical, that not one Jew can live there. This is the only time anything like this has happened. Like in the country of Germany, they don't say only Germans can live in Germany. There can't be any Jews, any Irish, any Italians. They're not allowed by law to live in this land. Have you ever even heard of anything like this, where entire nationalities are excluded? But this is the case with the Jewish people in the West Bank. The West Bank, which is sacred holy ground, where Joseph said, bury me there. Jacob said, bury me there. And now we're not even allowed to have one person there. And Israel is expected to just put up with all of this and to just accept that their holy ground is now verboten, or off limits to Jews. That's how it is. It's called the Cave of Machpelah, which was actually purchased by Abraham from a Hittite, because this land was not Palestinian land. There was no such thing as Palestinians until this was invented somewhere around the 60s in order to have a pretense to get rid of Israel. At that time, a Hittite owned it, and it was part of an area where people were migrating all around, all different peoples, including, of course, the Jewish people. So that's one thing of significance that happens in this last passage. The other thing that happens is that Joseph has two children, Ephraim and Manasseh. Ephraim is the younger, Manasseh is the older, but they're blessed in reversed order. This is a common theme in the Torah, showing that the actual normal order of things is often reversed because of merit and because of challenging the status quo. So Jacob, the patriarch, before he dies, blesses all of his children. But then he adopts the children of Joseph, Ephraim and Manasseh, as his own and blesses them. And the blessing today that people use for their children, their sons, is may you be like Ephraim and Manasseh. Why like those two? Because apparently they got along. They didn't sell anybody into slavery. They got along fine. They didn't do a whole lot. You don't see them doing much. It's probably what they didn't do. They didn't get involved in any family squabbles. They were peaceful. And so that's the blessing. May you be like Ephraim and Manasseh. Those are the main things that happen. Each brother gets a blessing. And then the passage ends with the death of Joseph, and it says he was entombed and embalmed, as was the custom in Egypt, and then his bones were carried off into the land of Canaan, but not at that time. That was going to happen after the Jews finally left Egypt after 400 and some odd years of servitude. That's Vayechi. Interesting that it starts out, and he lived, but the passage is really about the death of Jacob, the death of Joseph, and then the blessings of the people. In the blessings, the Jews are told once again, you will be a blessing to the land, and also they are told that the Jewish people will be the progenitors, the ancestors of, it says, Kahal Amim. Kahal means a community or a congregation. Sometimes you see Kehilat Yisrael, community of Israel. So you're going to be a Kahal Amim. Am is people, like Am Yisrael Chai. The people of Israel, Chai, live. Amim is the plural of Am, peoples. So the Jews are told you will be the ancestors of a community of nations, meaning that the Jews were never meant just to minister to other Jews. We were meant to bring the nations of the world together. And that's also reiterated in this passage. Now, that's all I wanted to say about this passage. There's a lot of things going on in the world today. We're looking now at Harvard University, which is now reconsidering whether they want to have a president who is not too keen on condemning people that condemn the Jews and say that genocide against Jews is permissible on their campus. You can not actually carrying it out, but recommending it. That people who advocate genocide against the Jewish people, sure, they have the right to voice their opinion and they can be heard. In the United States, obviously, they do have the right to say that, but the university has the right and the obligation to take action against people who abuse their right to speak and create an atmosphere where Jews feel uncomfortable. So absolutely, they're right to say it. And the college, university, in my opinion, has an obligation to act against people who are saying that, because it's not idle words. Words lead to action, and they're creating a climate of fear, a climate of hostility, a climate where the life of the Jewish people is considered of little value. If they ever tried to say that against blacks, well, if you want, you can kill all the black people in the world. That president of Harvard, Gay, would not be sitting idly by. You better be sure she'd take action. Same if they said something about that about women or gays or any other group. So I'm hoping that the board of Harvard will resign, all of them, for failure to take action against their president. And then maybe Harvard can be restored not only to a fine academic institution, but one with a social responsibility.